I'm right with you, Red 3. Got a problem here.
Eject!
I can hold it.
Pull up!
No, I'm all right.
Of the 4 available Star Wars games on the Nintendo 64, this one may very well be the best. Welcome back to the Retro Room, everyone, and today we're pulling the fan favorite Star Wars Rogue Squadron off the shelf. Released December 3rd, 1998, Star Wars Rogue Squadron was developed by Factor5 in collaboration with LucasArts, who also published the game. Although it was marketed for and remembered as a Nintendo 64 title, it was also released for PC on disc. I even owned a copy back as a kid, and I loved it then too. The design of this game was actually inspired by the opening level of Shadows of the Empire, where the player takes control of a snowspeeder for a level, as we've covered previously in my Shadows of the Empire retrospective. It was that level that gave Factor5 the idea for a whole game in that fashion, and they pitched it to LucasArts, who approved and greenlit the project. Although I opted to cover the PC port of Shadows of the Empire, I chose to play through this one using N64 emulation with a USB N64 controller, keeping it authentic. Graphically, for a game that's nearly 25 years old, it looks spectacular. They were really pushing the limits of what this console was capable of. I mean, this was nearing the end of the N64's lifespan. The Sony PlayStation had come out at this point, and Metal Gear Solid was already on the market. With over a dozen unique planets across 16 levels, this is easily one of the more impressive looking titles available on the N64. This was achieved thanks to the Nintendo Expansion Pack, allowing the game to render at a higher resolution than it normally would. It isn't necessary to run the game, but it does make it look nicer. As for the levels, most of them look pretty similar. It's normally just some rocky terrain with the occasional outpost area. Some levels try to be a bit more ambitious, like Corellia, which shows some city structures. It's cool for the time, and I like that it feels so vast and exciting. This is something a lot of these other vehicle-based Star Wars games have missed the mark on. Even the Starfighter games, which would come several years later, only showed roughly 5 planets per game. Granted, I think the idea was quality over quantity, but it didn't really translate well because the levels there looked roughly the same as the levels here, only nicer because they were on a PS2 as opposed to the N64. Speaking of running on an N64, let's talk about how this game handles on an N64 controller. I'd say it feels natural and responds really well. The controller is pretty infamous for its strange 3-pronged design, but the ships react as you would expect for the most part. Despite it having a PC release, you can tell it was designed and intended for the Nintendo 64, which isn't a bad thing because, like I said, Factor5 really killed it on the optimization of these controls. The game was mostly designed by Factor5, but LucasArts was involved pretty heavily across the game's development, and one of their primary contributions was to the game's narrative. Reps from LucasArts handled the game's story and ensured it didn't contradict any of the pre-established canon, and that it was compelling and exciting. So let's talk about that narrative. Although the game was released in 1998, the concept of Rogue Squadron already existed, and was featured in the immensely popular Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. The concept had then spun off into its own series of books called Star Wars X-Wing. The first of the 10-book series was aptly titled Star Wars X-Wing Rogue Squadron. However, every one of those 10 books and the Thrawn novels all take place after the 6th movie, Return of the Jedi, while this game actually takes place between episodes 4 and 5 during Luke's brief tenure with Rogue Squadron before going on to become a Jedi. Speaking of, Luke is our player character for this title, and it's really cool to play as him in a new story. There are a surprisingly low amount of games that let you play as Luke across a series of single-player missions, and you'll never guess where our story starts.
Good morning, Wedge. The rest of Rogue Squadron is still back at base, but I thought we could take an early morning run through Beggar's Canyon.
Fortunately, this is the only level on Tatooine, not counting the bonus level, so there's still tons of interesting planets we get to visit later. I love Star Wars Legends, so it doesn't need a very strong story to pull me in for a game like this. That being said, Rogue Squadron does have a half-decent story actually, but it's nothing super crazy. The game centers around 3 main acts. with the plot of the first act showing the defection of Imperial officer Crix May-Dean to the Rebel Alliance. Casual fans may remember this character from his appearance in Return of the Jedi, and he plays a central role in the plot of this game. There's even a whole mission on Corellia where we fight to save General May-Dean from an Imperial attack to kill him, which was one of my favorite missions. Han Solo even shows up to help us fight.
Han, Chewie, well, what are you doing here? How you doing, kid? Thought I might give you a hand. This is my hometown, after all.
Following this, the player attacks a moon with May-Dean heading up as leader of Gold Squadron in a Y-Wing. It's here where we shoot down an Imperial TIE interceptor with a pilot named Kason Moore.
It's from Gold Squadron.
This is Lieutenant Kason Moore of the Imperial 128th to Unidentified Y-Wing. Are you quite done? My vehicle has been disabled for a good 2 minutes now.
Jason Moore, consider yourself a prisoner of the Rebel Alliance.
Well, if you quit shooting at me, I have a proposal to make. One which would serve us all.
Shortly after being taken prisoner by the rebels, she offers to defect to the rebel side and give them information regarding the location of 3 critical Imperial bases. She then joins the rogues as a member and assists them in their assault on those bases. While attacking an enclave on Kylie 2, however, Wedge gets shot down and taken prisoner by the Imperials.
Look, it's an ambush. I don't know where they came from. I don't have nav control anymore. You can't? Yeah, great. Main computer offline. Targeting computer offline. We just lost row 7. I can't... Get out of there, Wedge. Copy, what happened? Wedge made it, but he's gonna be captured for sure. I'm under a lot of fire. Increase speed, full throttle. Hold on, Wedge.
Well, the rogues can't just let one of their best be sent to the spice mines of Kessel, so they mount a rescue mission with information on what train he'll be on and when. After a successful rescue mission, our main antagonist is revealed to be one Moff Cole Searden. A pretty generic bad guy, to be honest. He's got your uptight Imperial demeanor, your typical Royal British accent, and a few sinister-sounding one-liners.
Greetings, Commander Skywalker. So you're the young man who destroyed the Death Star. Moff Searden. Do you wish to surrender now, or can I destroy you?
What follows are a series of back-and-forth attacks between the rogues and the Moff. The rogues save some Bacta tanks on the planets of Talaran and Fest, while Searden attacks a major city on the planet of Chandrilla. This all leads to a penultimate level where we're flying around in a Y-Wing on Celeste trying not to be killed by the dozens of different missiles all chasing behind us. This was all a diversion, however, as we're told by General Riken that Moff Searden is storming a rebel base on Typhera. This ends up being the final chapter of the main story, as we fight off the last of Searden's Imperial units and face him down in a final boss battle. It's a short and sweet, self-contained Star Wars story that fits snugly right between episodes 4 and 5. I really quite liked it, to be honest. There's even an added level that acts as an epilogue to the main story, where we time skip to 6 years past the Battle of Endor and play as Wedge Antilles as we take down a handful of massive world devastators from the Imperial Remnant during an attack on Mon Calamari. This might actually be the coolest mission. As I talked about earlier, this game actually feels fantastic to play. It responds to your inputs as you'd expect and controls very smoothly. Each vehicle even feels totally different and unique as well. They all have different firing modes, different speeds, boosts, durability, and special features. Our most common vehicle is, of course, the iconic X-Wing. It's probably the vehicle you'll be in the most, but that's okay because it's the best one of the default vehicles. It's not as fast as the A-Wing, but it's got more durability, and it's significantly faster than the Y-Wing. It's got multiple different firing modes and a handful of proton torpedoes for taking out land turrets or ATSTs. Every vehicle has a boost and a slow function, but the X-Wing actually has a secondary boost that doubles the movement speed entirely. We can engage this by closing our S-foils, which means we can't fire and it makes it harder to move, but it's very useful for closing gaps between you and another fighter. The A-Wing is the second most common fighter you'll use, and although you'll notice it moves faster than the X-Wing, as I mentioned before, it is also a lot less durable, so you really need to be careful how much damage you're incurring while piloting this one. No special boost, and we get missiles instead of proton torpedoes. But it's a very fun vehicle to fly. Feels like it's a paper plane sometimes, though. The third vehicle you'll use the most is the Speeder. It controls similarly to the X-Wing in terms of speed and durability, but without missiles or the S-foil boost. However, it does come with a tow cable, which of course we use to take down AT-ATs. You always know there's going to be Imperial walkers in a level if you're flying one of these. It's a cool mechanic, and of course this little mechanic in Shadows of the Empire is what inspired Factor 5 to pursue developing Rogue Squadron, so it's fitting we use it as often as we do. Finally, you've got the Y-Wing. It's slow, and it fires lasers like a bantha runs. Slow. It's cool to have this vehicle in the game, and it does come equipped with bombs, which are very useful in a few instances, but I just wish it was more fun to play these levels. Fortunately, they're pretty infrequent, so you won't have to suffer them for very long. The remaining ships are not really part of the main campaign, with the exception of the V-Wing, which you only use in the final level following the time skip. I do like the inclusion, but it's honestly a nightmare to control. It flies too fast, shoots too slow, and doesn't even look very cool. V-Wings in general are just not my favorite ships. Without cheats, that's all we get. But we're going to throw in a few passcodes and take a look at some of the hidden vehicles. Entering in cheat codes, we unlock 3 hidden bonus levels and a few additional vehicles. So let's cover 2 at once. The first bonus level features the T-16 Skyhopper making the Beggar's Canyon run on Tatooine. It's a fun little addition, but of course it's not really all that fun to play. You're just navigating the canyon with Luke's friends. I'm glad it's here because I think it might be the highest quality way to make the Beggar's Canyon run in a game. The third level is just the Death Star Trench Run. Very cool, but more of just a novelty than anything else. And the third and final hidden level is the Battle of Hoth. I, again, love the inclusion for the novelty, but realistically, it's just repeating the tow cable mechanic like 3 times in a row. Still love that it's there, though. Some other hidden content includes the Millennium Falcon, a TIE Interceptor, an AT-ST limited to 1 small bonus level, and the N-1 Starfighter. The Falcon is a monster. It's overpowered, has auto-locking, and takes way more damage than any of the other ships. Playing the levels with this ship is akin to just cheating, but it's still so much fun. The Interceptor feels similar to the A-Wing or the V-Wing, except it has no shields, so flying it feels like you're made of paper. And the bonus level is actually pretty fun. This might be the earliest instance of a Star Wars game letting you control an Imperial AT-ST like this, so that's cool. Of course, all of these require cheat codes to access, but the N1 actually requires 2 cheat codes in a row and doesn't give you any indication you found it because the developers were hoping to keep its inclusion a secret until after the release of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which would release several months after Rogue Squadron released. The team worked with LucasArts to include the ship's design in the game early before the movie dropped. It's also fun to play with, and feels like such a novelty to be included. Man, it would have been cool to have had Cognizance back when the prequel movies were releasing, but I was too young to remember The Phantom Menace. I remember seeing Attack of the Clones in theaters, and of course Revenge of the Sith, but those are the earliest ones, and I was still so young. The N1 is actually the best starfighter, and the best ship other than the Falcon. It's got the speed of the V-Wing, but maybe a little slower, the durability of the X-Wing, the fire capabilities of the A-Wing, and the seeker missiles of the Falcon. Of course, they did this because it was the new ship for the new exciting movie, and this ship is not nearly this powerful in-universe. A final note is that Rogue Squadron actually had a composer come in and do some original tunes for this game. There are motifs from the Williams scores littered all throughout the game, but there are some original tracks too, which really helps this game to stand out as something unique compared to games that just relied on music from the movies for the whole game. Well, we're at that big question now. Is Rogue Squadron worth playing? In case I hadn't been clear throughout this video, the answer is a definitive yes. I highly recommend this game to anyone who enjoys retro games, Star Wars games, or flying games. In fact, I think this may even be the best Star Wars game I've shown on this channel yet. I may even recommend this over any of the other Star Wars games I've talked about. And there's really no excuse not to play it because Rogue Squadron is readily available on Steam right now for a very reasonable price of $10 without a sale. I even booted it up myself just to make sure it ran with ease, and it didn't need any external work from me to make it launch. Just hit download, install, and play. That being said, the game does have a few downsides, the biggest of them being the life system. If you die 3 times on a mission, you have to restart the mission all over, which seems harmless at first, but really starts to get annoying on the last 3 missions when missiles and TIE interceptors are spamming you endlessly, and it does kind of start to suck the fun out of it. It is more than possible to beat the game as intended, however, and I practically did. But after getting to the final boss and dying, I did turn on infinite lives so I could just finish the experience and get this video done. So there's always that as an option as well. This difficulty spike doesn't come anywhere close to the spikes or issues we've seen pop up in the other Star Wars titles so far though, like Bounty Hunter or Shadows of the Empire. All in all, Rogue Squadron is a fantastic accomplishment, and I feel totally comfortable saying that it's among the very best of the games available for the Nintendo 64. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like always, I hope you'll consider dropping a like or a comment down below because that helps me out getting these videos into the algorithm. And tell me about your experiences with Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Which port did you play it on? Did you like it? You can always follow me on X also. It's the only social media platform I really use. I do a lot more than just Star Wars content, so stick around if you just enjoy videos about retro or older games in general. Although, I do tend to lean into Star Wars, so if that's what you're into, trust me, there's plenty more coming. Like always, I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, that's all I've got for you.